The Zephyrian High Command had never experienced such terror. Admiral Crixtel's forearms trembled as she watched the tactical display, her crystalline eyes reflecting the red warning lights that bathed the command center. Around her, dozens of her officers frantically worked their stations, their usual calm efficiency replaced by barely controlled panic. "Report," she barked, her voice carrying the authority that had commanded respect across 3 galactic quadrants. "Admiral, we've lost contact with the Outer Rim colonies," came the reply from her communications officer, Lieutenant Veltar. His normally steady voice cracked as he continued, 17 worlds have gone dark in the past solar cycle. No distress signals, no evacuation alerts, nothing." Crixtel felt her stomach turn. The Zephyrian Empire had stood for over 2,000 years, their advanced technology and superior tactics allowing them to expand across countless star systems. They had faced rebellions, conquered primitive species, and maintained order through their powerful fleet. But this was different. The first reports had seemed impossible. Entire planetary defense networks, each capable of destroying small moons, had simply vanished. Military installations that could withstand supernova-level bombardments were found as nothing more than cooling slag. Most disturbing of all, there were survivors on some worlds, civilians who spoke of ships that moved like ghosts through space, weapons that tore through shields as if they were paper, and beings that fought with a savagery that defied all military doctrine. "Show me the reconnaissance data from Kepler-7, Crixtel ordered. The main holographic display shifted, showing the devastated remains of what had once been a thriving industrial world. The massive orbital shipyards that had produced the Empire's most advanced vessels were twisted metal sculptures drifting in space. The planet's surface showed crater patterns unlike anything in their military databases, precise, methodical, as if someone had systematically eliminated every strategic target with surgical precision. "The attack pattern is unusual," reported Science Officer Yimdar, his tentacles nervously coiling and uncoiling as he analyzed the data. "The attackers didn't use overwhelming force. They used just enough power to achieve their objectives, no more. This suggests either conservation of resources or..." He paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. "They wanted to send a message." Before Crixtel could respond, the command center's emergency klaxons began wailing. Emergency lights bathed everything in a harsh red glow as her tactical officer's voice cut through the noise. "Admiral, multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace at the system's edge. They're not using any propulsion signatures we recognize." The main display switched to show the outer system. At first, there was nothing, just the normal scatter of asteroids and the distant glow of their star. Then, as if reality itself was being torn open, shapes began to appear. They didn't emerge from hyperspace in the usual brilliant flash of exotic particles. Instead, they seemed to fold themselves out of nothingness, their forms becoming solid, as if the universe was remembering they existed. "By the eternal stars," whispered someone behind her. The ships were unlike anything in the Imperial databases. They were angular, brutal things that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their hulls showed no elegant curves or artistic flourishes that marked advanced civilizations. These vessels were built for one purpose: war. Even from this distance, their weapons systems were clearly visible. Massive gun batteries, missile pods, and energy projectors that dwarfed anything the Zephyrians had ever constructed. "How many?" Crixtel asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Preliminary count shows 47 capital ships, Admiral. Each one is approximately 3 times the mass of our largest dreadnought. They're accompanied by what appears to be several hundred smaller vessels." The Admiral's blood turned to ice. The Empire's entire home fleet consisted of 12 capital ships and their escorts. Even if they called in every vessel from every system, they would be outnumbered and outgunned by a massive margin. "Are they responding to our communication attempts?" "Negative, Admiral. They're maintaining complete radio silence." But the communications officer paused, checking his readings again. They're broadcasting something on an open frequency. It's not directed at us. It appears to be an internal communication. Put it through the translators. The command center fell silent except for the hum of processing equipment. Then, clear as if it came from someone standing beside them, a voice filled the air. It was deep, measured, and carried an accent unlike anything in their linguistic databases. This is Admiral Harrison of the United Earth Defense Force, commanding the Expeditionary Fleet. All units, you're weapons free. Primary objective remains unchanged. Elimination of all Zephyrian military assets. Collateral damage to civilian populations should be minimized, but mission parameters take priority. Remember, these creatures have been systematically exterminating peaceful species for centuries. Today, that ends. The transmission cut off, leaving the Zephyrian command center in stunned silence. Admiral Crixtel felt her hearts racing as the implications sank in. These weren't random raiders or pirates. This was an organized military force, and they had come specifically for the Zephyrians. Admiral, her tactical officer said quietly, "They're moving. All contacts are adjusting course toward our position. Estimated time to weapons range, 47 standard minutes." Crixtel straightened her shoulders. She had not risen to command the home fleet by backing down from fights, no matter how hopeless they seemed. Signal all ships, battle stations, deploy the fleet in defensive formation around the orbital platforms. If these humans want to fight, we'll give them one they'll remember. But even as she gave the orders, doubt gnawed at her mind. In all their centuries of conquest, the Zephyrians had never faced an enemy that struck with such precision, such purpose. The way these human ships moved through space, the casual efficiency with which they had dismantled the outer colonies, it spoke of experience, of a military machine that had been honed through countless conflicts. As her fleet formed up around the home system's defensive installations, Admiral Crixtel couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to face something far beyond their experience. The humans had traveled impossible distances to reach them, had somehow learned of their military installations and weaknesses, and now approached with the confidence of a force that had never known defeat. The final transmission from the human admiral echoed in her mind. Today, that ends. She was beginning to understand that he wasn't just talking about Zephyrian expansion. He was talking about the Zephyrian Empire itself. In the darkness between the stars, the human fleet continued its steady advance, their angular ships cutting through space like knives through silk. Behind them, they left a trail of liberated worlds and freed species. Ahead of them lay the heart of an empire that had ruled through fear and oppression for 2 millennia. The Zephyrians were about to learn why humanity had earned their place among the stars, not through conquest, but through the simple principle that some lines should never be crossed. And the systematic extermination of peaceful species was one of them. Captain Elena Rodriguez gripped the armrests of her command chair as the UEDS Retribution dropped out of hyperspace. The bridge around her was a study in controlled chaos, her crew moving with the practiced efficiency that came from 3 years of constant warfare against the Zephyrian Empire. Unlike the alien vessels they faced, human ships were designed for their crews, with workstations that accommodated human physiology and displays that fed information in ways the human brain could process quickly. "Captain, we're in formation with Admiral Harrison's task force," reported her navigator, Lieutenant Chun. "All systems green, weapon batteries charged and ready." Elena nodded, her eyes fixed on the main tactical display. The Zephyrian home fleet was impressive by most standards. 12 massive dreadnoughts surrounded by cruisers, destroyers, and what appear to be heavily armed orbital defense platforms. Their ships gleamed with the polished perfection that marked an empire at its height, their hulls decorated with intricate patterns that spoke of artistic achievement alongside military might. "Sensor analysis, Commander Park?" she asked her science officer. "Their technology is advanced, Captain. Energy shields that operate on quantum resonance frequencies, plasma-based weapon systems, and what appears to be some form of gravitational manipulation for faster-than-light travel." Commander Park paused, studying his readings more carefully. However, their tactical formations are predictable. They're deploying in classical defensive patterns that prioritize the protection of their largest ships. Elena smiled grimly. That was the problem with empires that had grown fat on easy victories against primitive opponents. They had never faced an enemy that could match their technology while bringing something they couldn't understand: human adaptability and the fury of a species that had clawed its way up from a single world through sheer stubborn determination. 3 years ago, humanity had still been confined to their home system, just beginning to explore nearby star clusters with their first faster-than-light vessels. They were a young species, barely 2 centuries removed from global wars, still learning to work together as a united world government. They should have been easy prey for an empire like the Zephyrians. The first contact had come when the exploration vessel Horizons had stumbled across a Zephyrian extermination operation in the Kepler system. Captain Maria Santos had watched in horror as alien warships systematically destroyed the cities of a species that had just achieved spaceflight. The defenders had no chance. Their primitive missiles and energy weapons barely scratched the Zephyrian shields. Captain Santos had broadcast everything back to Earth before the Zephyrians destroyed her ship. The images of orbital bombardment, of defenseless cities burning, of an entire civilization being erased simply because they existed in space the Empire wanted, had united humanity in a way nothing ever had before. "Captain," her communications officer interrupted her thoughts. "Admiral Harrison is requesting all ship commanders join the tactical briefing." The holographic conference room materialized around Elena's command chair, bringing her face-to-face with the other 46 ship captains in the fleet. Admiral Harrison appeared at the head of the virtual table, his weathered face bearing the scars of the Battle of Tau Ceti, where he had held off 3 Zephyrian task forces with only 7 ships. "Ladies and gentlemen," the Admiral began, his voice carrying the weight of command across 3 years of desperate warfare. "This is what we've been building toward. The Zephyrian home fleet represents approximately 30% of their remaining military strength. If we can break them here, we can force them to the negotiating table." A tactical display appeared in the center of the conference, showing both fleets in relation to the Zephyrian home system. Red markers indicated enemy positions, while blue showed the human formation. "The enemy has positioned themselves to protect their orbital infrastructure and command facilities," continued Admiral Harrison. "They're expecting us to engage in a standard fleet action, ship against ship, formation against formation. They've calculated that their superior numbers and defensive position give them the advantage." Captain Morrison of the destroyer Wolverine raised her hand. "Sir, their analysis isn't wrong. They do have us outnumbered, and their individual ships mount heavier weapons than ours." "True," Harrison acknowledged, "but they're thinking like an empire that's been unchallenged for 2,000 years. They've never faced an enemy that's willing to sacrifice everything for victory. More importantly, they've never faced humans." Elena felt a familiar chill run down her spine. She had seen that look in the Admiral's eyes before, the cold calculation that had turned impossible situations into stunning victories. It was the same expression he had worn at New Geneva when he had rammed his flagship through a Zephyrian battle line to save a refugee convoy. "Our ships may be smaller," Harrison continued, "but they're faster and more maneuverable. More importantly, our crews have something the Zephyrians don't understand: the absolute conviction that some things are worth dying for." The tactical display zoomed in on the enemy formation, highlighting weak points in their defensive array. The Zephyrians have made their battle line beautiful and symmetrical, perfect for parades and showing off their power, terrible for adapting to unexpected tactics. Elena studied the formation more carefully and began to see what the Admiral was planning. The Zephyrian ships were indeed arranged with mathematical precision, each vessel positioned to provide optimal fire support for its neighbors. But that same precision meant they couldn't adapt quickly if their formation was disrupted. "Captain Rodriguez," Harrison said, turning to face her directly, Your ship has the most advanced electronic warfare suite in the fleet. How long can you keep their communication scrambled? If I can get within 5,000 kilometers, I can jam their tactical networks for approximately 12 minutes, sir. But getting that close to their battle line. She left the implications unsaid. 12 minutes, Harrison repeated thoughtfully. That should be enough. He turned to address the full conference. Retribution will spearhead the attack, jamming enemy communications and breaking their formation coherence. The moment their tactical networks go dark, all ships will engage with Pattern 7. A collective intake of breath swept through the conference. Pattern 7 was the most aggressive assault formation in human naval doctrine, a full-speed attack that relied on overwhelming the enemy's ability to respond rather than exchanging long-range fire. It was devastatingly effective against confused or disorganized opponents, but suicidal against a prepared enemy. Sir, Captain Okafor of the cruiser Indomitable said carefully, Pattern 7 assumes we can close to effective range before they can coordinate their response. If Captain Rodriguez can't maintain the jamming, then we'll do what humans have always done when facing impossible odds, Harrison replied. We'll adapt, improvise, and make sure that if we're going down, we take as many of them with us as possible. The conference dissolved, leaving Elena alone on her bridge once again. Around her, her crew prepared for what might be their final battle. She thought about the images from the Kepler system, about the billions of beings who had died simply for existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. She thought about Earth, still recovering from the Zephyrian retaliatory strike that had killed 60 million people in the opening days of the war. Captain, her tactical officer reported, all weapons systems show green across the board. Electronic warfare suite is powered and ready. We're locked and loaded. Elena nodded, settling back at her chair. Through the main view screen, she could see the sleek forms of her sister ships as they adjusted their positions for the attack run. Each vessel represented thousands of hours of human labor, the collective effort of species that had put aside their differences to face a common threat. Signal the Admiral, she ordered. Retribution is ready to lead the attack. The response came back immediately. All ships, this is Admiral Harrison. Today we fight not just for ourselves, but for every species the Zephyrians have destroyed and every species they plan to destroy in the future. Remember, they started this war by attacking the defenseless. We're going to end it by showing them what happens when humans get angry. Elena felt her crew straighten around her, their faces set with grim determination. In the distance, the Zephyrian fleet waited in perfect formation, confident in their superiority and secure in their defensive positions. They were about to learn why humanity had never met a fight they wouldn't take. The battle began with deceptive quiet. Admiral Crixtel watched the human fleet maintain their position at the edge of weapons range, their angular ships hanging motionless in space like predators studying their prey. For nearly an hour, neither side moved, and she began to hope that perhaps the humans would recognize the futility of their position and withdraw. That hope died when her sensor operator suddenly jerked upright at his station. Admiral, the human formation is there accelerating. All ships, full attack speed directly toward our center line. Crixtel spun toward the tactical display, her four eyes widening in disbelief. The human ships were indeed moving, but not in any pattern that made tactical sense. Instead of maneuvering to exploit weaknesses in her formation or attempting to outflank her positions, they were charging straight at her strongest point like ancient warriors with swords raised. They're committing suicide, breathed her tactical officer. No formation can survive a head-on assault against our concentrated firepower. Open fire as soon as they enter extreme range, Crixtel ordered. All batteries, coordinated bombardment. We'll end this quickly. The first salvo from the Zephyrian fleet lit up space with deadly beauty. Hundreds of plasma bolts and energy beams reached out across the void, their brilliant streams creating a lethal web between the two forces. Any normal fleet would have been vaporized by such overwhelming firepower. The human ships kept coming. Explosions blossomed around the advancing vessels as some shots found their marks. But instead of the catastrophic destruction Crixtel expected, she watched in growing alarm as the human ships continued their charge with barely diminished speed. Their shields absorbed incredible punishment, and when those failed, their armor plating seemed to shrug off hits that should have crippled them. "Impossible," whispered her science officer. "Their defensive systems shouldn't be capable of withstanding that level of bombardment. Fire again. All ships, continuous bombardment," Crixtel commanded. The second salvo was even more concentrated than the first, every ship in her fleet pouring fire into the approaching humans. This time she saw several of their vessels take serious damage. One destroyer spinning out of formation with its hull breached and, venting atmosphere, a cruiser's port side blackened and dead. But still they came, and now they were close enough for Crixtel to see details of their construction. The human ships weren't elegant like Zephyrian vessels. They were blunt, functional things that looked like they had been built in shipyards where form followed function, and nothing else mattered. Their hulls were scarred and patched, showing the wear of constant warfare. "Admiral," her communications officer called out, "we're experiencing some interference with our tactical networks. Sporadic signal loss between ships." Crixtel felt the first stirring of real concern. Perfect coordination was essential for her defensive strategy. If their communication systems were being disrupted, source of the interference? Unknown, Admiral. It appears to be some form of electronic warfare, but we can't isolate the transmission point. On the tactical display, the human formation suddenly shifted. What had been a straight-line charge abruptly became something far more complex, with individual ships breaking away from the main group in patterns that seemed random but somehow coordinated. Before her tactical officer could adjust the fleet's targeting solutions, the humans were among them. The lead human ship, a vessel barely half the size of her flagship, punched through the outer defensive screen like a bullet through paper. Its weapons spoke in controlled bursts, each shot precisely targeted at critical systems rather than attempting to destroy entire ships. A Zephyrian cruiser found its main guns disabled by surgical strikes. A destroyer lost its shields as human missiles somehow penetrated its defensive grid. "How are they doing this?" Crixtel demanded. "Their ships are smaller. Their weapons are lighter than ours." Her tactical officer's hands flew over his controls as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. "Admiral, they're not fighting like a normal fleet. They're operating independently, each ship engaging multiple targets while supporting the others. It's like they're thinking as one mind distributed across dozens of bodies." The Admiral finally understood. The humans weren't fighting a traditional fleet engagement. They were fighting like a pack of predators, each ship covering the others while exploiting every weakness they could find. When one human vessel took damage, two others would move to screen it while a third would strike at the ship that had scored the hit. "Break formation," she ordered desperately. "All ships, independent action. Don't let them isolate us." But her order came too late. The communication interference had grown stronger, and only half her ships received the command. The others maintained their defensive positions, creating a mixed formation that was neither coordinated nor independent, exactly what the humans had been waiting for. Captain Rodriguez felt the retribution shudder as another Zephyrian plasma bolt scraped across her starboard armor. But her ship's electronic warfare suite continued its relentless jamming of enemy communications. Around her, the human fleet moved like a living thing, each captain anticipating the moves of their comrades through years of shared combat experience. "Direct hit on the enemy flagship's port shield generator," reported her tactical officer. "Shield strength down to 60%. Signal the Wolverine and Indomitable," Elena ordered. "Concentrated fire on that weak point. Let's see how their admiral handles command when her ship is taking direct hits." Through her view screen, she watched the destroyer Wolverine streak past a Zephyrian battleship, its point defense lasers carving precise lines across the alien vessel's weapon mountings. The much larger ship tried to bring its main guns to bear, but Captain Morrison had already changed course, leaving the battleship firing at empty space while human missiles struck its unprotected rear sections. This was what the Zephyrians didn't understand about human warfare. They fought like an empire, with rigid hierarchies, predetermined plans, and the assumption that superior technology would always triumph. Humans fought like the scrappy underdogs they had always been, using speed and cunning to overcome larger, stronger opponents. "Captain," her navigator called out, "the enemy flagship is trying to withdraw from the battle line. Should we pursue?" Elena studied the tactical situation. Admiral Harrison's gamble had worked perfectly. The Zephyrian formation was in chaos, their ships fighting individual battles without coordination, while the human fleet operated as a seamless unit despite the jamming that was confusing their enemies. "Negative," she decided. "Let her go. Our job is to break their fleet, not hunt down individual ships. Signal all vessels, maintain the attack pattern, and continue targeting their heavy units." Across the battlefield, the tide of the engagement became clear. Zephyrian ships, built for symmetrical engagements and overwhelming firepower, found themselves outmaneuvered by smaller, more agile human vessels that struck like lightning and withdrew before return fire could be coordinated. One by one, the alien dreadnoughts found their weapons disabled, their shields collapsed, their formations broken. Admiral Crixtell watched her perfect fleet dissolve into confusion and defeat. The humans had done the impossible. They had turned a defensive advantage into a rout through sheer tactical superiority and a level of coordination that defied everything she understood about space combat. "Admiral," her communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet commander." "Put it through," she replied, knowing what she would hear. Admiral Harrison's voice filled the command center, calm and professional despite the chaos of battle around them. "Zephyrian Fleet, this is Admiral Harrison of the United Earth Defense Force. Your military capabilities have been neutralized. Surrender now, and we guarantee the safety of your crews. Continue fighting, and we'll be forced to destroy you completely." Crixtell looked around her bridge at her officers, saw the defeat in their eyes, and knew that the age of Zephyrian dominance was over. The humans had proven that raw military power meant nothing without the tactical skill to use it effectively. "Signal our remaining ships," she said finally. "All vessels are stand down and prepare to be boarded." The greatest fleet in Zephyrian history had been broken not by superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but by an enemy that refused to fight by the rules of civilized warfare. The humans had brought something to the battlefield that the Empire had never encountered in 2,000 years of conquest. The desperate fury of a species that would rather die than surrender their principles. The surrender of the Zephyrian home fleet should have marked the end of the war, but Admiral Harrison knew better than to trust the defeated Empire completely. As human Marines boarded the captured vessels and Zephyrian crews were processed as prisoners of war, intelligence reports flooded in from across the galaxy that painted a disturbing picture. In conference room aboard his flagship, Harrison studied the holographic display showing the current tactical situation. Red markers indicated remaining Zephyrian strongholds, while blue showed the advance of human liberation forces. What concerned him were the yellow markers, unknown vessels that had been detected moving through sectors that should have been empty. "Sir," reported Commander Sarah Chan, his intelligence chief, "we've confirmed that approximately 40% of the Zephyrian fleet escaped the home system before our arrival. More troubling, they appear to be implementing some kind of coordinated withdrawal to predetermined fallback positions." Harrison rubbed his tired eyes. 3 years of constant warfare had aged him far more than the calendar suggested, and the thought that this conflict might continue indefinitely filled him with weary frustration. "Show me the refugee camps," he ordered. The display shifted to show dozens of star systems where human relief forces had established temporary facilities for the species that had been liberated from Zephyrian oppression. The numbers were staggering, billions of beings from hundreds of different worlds, all displaced by centuries of imperial expansion. The situation is complex, sir, Commander Chen continued. Many of these species have been under Zephyrian rule for so long that they have no functioning governments or military forces. Some don't even remember their original homeworlds. They're completely dependent on us for everything from food to basic security. And we can't protect them all if the remaining Zephyrian forces decide to start retaking territory, Harrison concluded grimly. A new voice interrupted the briefing. Admiral, incoming priority transmission from Earth Command. The holographic display shifted to show Admiral Patricia Martinez, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and Harrison's direct superior. Her expression was grave as she began her report. David, I'm afraid the situation at home is becoming critical. The war effort has consumed nearly every resource we have. Industrial production is at maximum capacity. Our reserves are exhausted, and we're drafting personnel from civilian sectors just to crew our existing ships. The government is under enormous pressure to negotiate a peace settlement. Harrison felt his jaw tighten. Admiral, we can't stop now. If we give the Zephyrians time to regroup and rebuild, I understand your concerns, Martinez interrupted, but the reality is that humanity is not equipped for a war of galactic conquest. We're a single-planet species fighting an empire that controlled thousands of worlds. The miracle is that we've lasted this long. The holographic image flickered as the transmission momentarily weakened, then stabilized. However, there have been some unexpected developments. Several of the liberated species have approached us about forming a defensive alliance. They're offering to contribute ships, personnel, and resources to continue the fight against the remaining Zephyrian forces. Harrison's mood brightened slightly. Throughout human history, their greatest victories had come not from individual strength, but from their ability to build coalitions and inspire others to fight alongside them. What kind of capabilities are we talking about? He asked. The Catalian Republic has a fleet of approximately 200 vessels, though they're primarily designed for defensive operations. The Vorthan Collective has advanced medical and logistics capabilities that could supplement our own. Most interesting is the Nexary Union. Their ships use a completely different propulsion system that the Zephyrians have never encountered. Commander Chun pulled up additional data on the holographic display. Sir, there's something else. Intelligence reports suggest that the remaining Zephyrian forces are not just withdrawing randomly. They appear to be concentrating around a specific sector designated as Crimson Harbor in their military communications. Harrison studied the star charts more carefully. Crimson Harbor was located in a dense stellar cluster approximately 300 light-years from the former Zephyrian home system. According to their captured intelligence, it was the site of massive military shipyards and research facilities that had been hidden from the rest of the galaxy for centuries. If they're massing their remaining forces there, he said slowly, they're either preparing for a last stand or planning something we haven't anticipated. There's more, sir, Chen continued. Long-range reconnaissance has detected massive energy signatures in that sector. Whatever they're building or preparing, it's on a scale we've never seen before. The implications were chilling. The Zephyrians had demonstrated throughout the war that they were willing to commit atrocities rather than accept defeat. If they were preparing some kind of superweapon or final gambit, the consequences for the galaxy could be catastrophic. Admiral Martinez's voice drew his attention back to the transmission. David, you have 48 hours to assess the situation and provide a recommendation. Can this alliance of liberated species provide enough support to justify continuing the offensive, or should we consolidate our gains and prepare for a defensive war? Harrison looked around the conference room at his staff officers, seeing the same mixture of exhaustion and determination that he felt in his own bones. They had come so far, liberated so many worlds, and saved so many innocent lives. The thought of stopping now, when the enemy might be preparing a counterattack that could undo everything they had accomplished, was almost unbearable. Admiral, he said finally, I'll need to meet with representatives of these allied species. If they're serious about joining the fight, I want to see exactly what they're bringing to the table. The transmission ended, leaving Harrison alone with his thoughts and the weight of command. Through the viewports of his ship, he could see the damaged Zephyrian vessels being escorted to processing facilities by human destroyers. In the distance, refugee transports from a dozen different species moved through space under the protection of his fleet. Each of those ships represented thousands of beings whose lives had been transformed by humanity's decision to intervene in a conflict that wasn't originally theirs. They had chosen to fight not for territory or resources, but for the simple principle that stronger civilizations shouldn't be allowed to exterminate weaker ones. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. Harrison activated his personal communicator to find Captain Rodriguez on the channel. "Admiral, we've completed the interrogation of the captured Zephyrian command staff. You need to hear what they've told us about Crimson Harbor." "Go ahead, Captain." "Sir, it's not just a military stronghold. According to Admiral Crixtell, it's the site of something called the Final Protocol, a contingency plan that was developed centuries ago in case the Empire faced complete defeat. She doesn't know the details, but she believes it involves some kind of weapon capable of sterilizing entire star systems." Harrison felt a chill run down his spine. The Zephyrians had already demonstrated their willingness to commit genocide against defenseless species. If they possessed a weapon that could threaten entire star systems, they might decide to take as much of the galaxy down with them as possible. "How long until our new allies can have their forces ready for combat operations?" he asked. "The Catalians say they can have their fleet mobilized within 72 hours. The others will need more time to coordinate with our tactical systems and communication protocols." Harrison made his decision. "Signal Earth Command. Tell them we're moving forward with the Alliance and preparing for an immediate assault on Crimson Harbor. We can't give the Zephyrians time to complete whatever they're planning." As he ended the transmission, Harrison reflected on the irony of the situation. Humanity had entered this war as a single species fighting against impossible odds. Now they found themselves leading a coalition of dozens of worlds, united by their shared determination to prevent the galaxy from falling into darkness. The next phase of the war would test not just human military capabilities, but their ability to forge the disparate species of the galaxy into a unified force capable of standing against tyranny. It was exactly the kind of impossible challenge that humanity had been overcoming since they first looked up at the stars and decided to reach for them. The assault on Crimson Harbor began with a sight that would have been impossible just 4 years earlier. A combined fleet of over 800 vessels from 43 different species, all united under human tactical command. Admiral Harrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the diverse array of ships that had answered humanity's call to arms. The Catalian vessels were sleek and crystalline, their hulls seeming to bend light around them. The Vorthan ships resembled massive organic growths more than traditional spacecraft, their biomechanical systems pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. Most remarkable were the Nexary vessels, which moved through space without any visible propulsion, their angular forms shifting through dimensions that human sensors could barely detect. "Admiral," reported his communications officer, "all Allied fleet elements report ready for combat. Coalition Command acknowledges your tactical authority." Harrison nodded, still somewhat amazed by the trust these species had placed in humanity. Most of them possessed technology that was centuries ahead of Earth's, yet they had chosen to follow human leadership in this final assault. It spoke to something that went beyond military capability, a recognition that humans possess something unique when it came to fighting against impossible odds. "What's our current intelligence on the target?" he asked Commander Chen. The holographic display shifted to show the Crimson Harbor system in detail. The stellar cluster contained 17 stars, with massive artificial structures orbiting several of them. The scale was breathtaking. Space stations the size of small moons, shipyards that could construct vessels larger than Earth cities, and, in the center of it all, something that defied classification. "The central facility appears to be some kind of stellar engineering project," Chen reported. Our best analysis suggests they're using the gravitational fields of multiple stars to power whatever they're building. Energy output readings are off the scale. Captain Yixtar of the Catalian Republic stepped forward, her crystalline form refracting the bridge lighting into prismatic patterns. Admiral Harrison, my people have legends of such devices. Ancient warnings passed down through generations speak of weapons that could consume entire star systems, turning their energy into directed force capable of destroying worlds across galactic distances. A star killer, whispered Lieutenant Park from the science station. Harrison felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. If the Zephyrians completed this weapon, they could hold the entire galaxy hostage. No world would be safe, no species secure. The irony was bitter. In their desperation to maintain their empire, they were willing to destroy everything they had once claimed to rule. All ships, this is Admiral Harrison, he broadcast to the combined fleet. We go into battle today, not as separate species or individual worlds, but as a unified force representing everything that is good and decent in this galaxy. The enemy has chosen to threaten not just our freedom, but our very existence. Today, we end their capacity to do harm. The fleet began its advance into the Crimson Harbor system, moving in a formation that combined human tactical doctrine with the unique capabilities of each allied species. The Nexary ships took point, their interdimensional drives allowing them to scout ahead while remaining undetectable to conventional sensors. The Catalian vessels formed a protective screen, their advanced shielding technology creating an umbrella of protection for the more vulnerable ships. As they approached the outer perimeter of the stellar cluster, the first signs of Zephyrian resistance appeared. Defense platforms hidden among the asteroids opened fire with weapons of previously unseen power, their energy beams capable of vaporizing cruiser-sized vessels with single hits. Evasive maneuvers. Harrison ordered. All ships, implement pattern Delta 7. The combined fleet scattered into predetermined attack formations, each species contributing their unique advantages to the assault. Vorth and Bio ships released clouds of self-replicating nanites that interfered with Zephyrian targeting systems. Catalian vessels used their dimensional shielding to appear in multiple locations simultaneously, confusing enemy fire control. Human ships did what they did best, adapted to changing conditions with split-second timing, and coordinated their attacks with ruthless efficiency. The battle for the outer defenses raged for 6 hours, with the Allied fleet pushing steadily inward despite mounting casualties. The Zephyrians fought with the desperation of a cornered animal, throwing everything they had at the advancing forces. But they were facing something they had never encountered before, a truly united galaxy fighting for its survival. Admiral, Captain Rodriguez reported from the Retribution, "We've broken through the outer defense ring. The central facility is directly ahead, but, sir, you need to see this." The main tactical display shifted to show the heart of Crimson Harbor, and Harrison felt his blood turn to ice. The central facility wasn't just a weapons platform. It was a massive stellar engineering project that had turned 3 stars into components of a single, gigantic machine. Streams of stellar matter flowed between the stars through artificial conduits, while the gravitational fields themselves had been shaped into focusing arrays. "Energy buildup detected," called out the science officer. "Whatever they're powering, it's coming online now." On the main screen, space itself seemed to ripple as the stellar engineering project reached critical mass. A beam of coherent gravitational force lanced out from the facility, striking a distant star in the outer system. Harrison watched in horror as the star began to destabilize, its nuclear fires flickering as its gravity well was torn apart by the artificial beam. "They're testing it," he realized. "If they complete the calibration sequence, they can target any star in the galaxy." The implications were staggering. With such a weapon, the Zephyrians could threaten every inhabited system, forcing the entire galaxy to submit to their rule or face total annihilation. It was the ultimate expression of their imperial philosophy, submit, or be destroyed on a scale that encompassed trillions of lives. All ships, emergency acceleration. Harrison broadcast. We have to reach that facility before they can complete their weapon calibration. The combined fleet surged forward at maximum speed, racing against time as the stellar engineering project continued its deadly work. Around them, the remaining Zephyrian forces threw themselves into the path of the advancing Allied ships, sacrificing themselves to buy time for their ultimate weapon to come online. Captain Rodriguez brought the Retribution alongside Harrison's flagship, her ship's electronic warfare suite working overtime to disrupt the facility's control systems. "Admiral, I can jam their targeting computers, but not for long. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it now." Harrison studied the tactical situation, calculating distances and energy readings with a speed that had made him humanity's greatest military commander. The stellar engineering facility was too massive to destroy with conventional weapons, and any attempt to approach it directly would expose his ships to the gravitational forces that powered the Starkiller. Then he noticed something in the facility's design that sparked an idea so audacious it might actually work. "All ships, concentrate fire on the gravitational focusing array between stars 2 and 3, he ordered. "If we can disrupt the gravitational flow, the entire system will destabilize." "Admiral," called out Captain Yixtar, "such an attack could cause a chain reaction. The gravitational disturbance might destroy this entire stellar cluster. Better to destroy it than let them use it to threaten the galaxy," Harrison replied grimly. "All ships, coordinated bombardment in 3, 2, 1, fire." 800 ships opened fire simultaneously, their combined weapons turning the space around the gravitational focusing array into a maelstrom of energy. Human plasma cannons, Catalian quantum disruptors, Vorthan bioenergy beams, and next-dimensional torpedoes all struck the same target, overwhelming the facility's defensive systems through sheer concentrated firepower. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, space itself began to twist as the artificial gravitational fields collapsed. The stellar engineering project, deprived of its carefully balanced gravitational flows, began to tear itself apart. The stars themselves flickered and pulsed as their modified gravity wells snapped back to natural configurations. The star killer died in a spectacular display of gravitational chaos, its massive structures crushed by the very forces they had tried to control. The Zephyrian fleet, caught in the gravitational turbulence, was scattered and destroyed as space itself turned against them. Admiral Harrison watched the destruction of the facility with mixed emotions. They had won. The immediate threat was over, and the Zephyrians no longer possessed the capability to threaten the galaxy. But the cost had been enormous, and the scars of this war would take generations to heal. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving surrender broadcasts from the remaining Zephyrian forces throughout the galaxy. It appears their command structure has collapsed with the destruction of Crimson Harbor." The war was over. Humanity, working alongside the species they had liberated, had not only defeated a galactic empire, but prevented the destruction of countless worlds. They had proven that cooperation and determination could overcome any advantage that technology or numbers might provide. As the combined fleet began rescue operations for the survivors of both sides, Harrison reflected on what this victory meant for the future. Humanity had entered this conflict as a young species barely capable of interstellar travel. They were ending it as the acknowledged leaders of a galactic coalition committed to preventing such atrocities from ever happening again. The age of empires built on conquest and oppression was over. In its place would rise something new, a galaxy united not by force, but by the shared commitment to protect the weak and ensure that all species had the right to determine their own destiny among the stars. It was, Admiral Harrison realized, exactly the kind of future that made all the sacrifice and struggle worthwhile. The Zephyrian High Command had never experienced such terror. Admiral Crickstell's 4 arms trembled as she watched the tactical display, her crystalline eyes reflecting the red warning lights that bathed the command center. Around her, dozens of her officers frantically worked their stations, their usual calm efficiency replaced by barely controlled panic. "Report!" she barked, her voice carrying the authority that had commanded respect across 3 galactic quadrants. "Admiral, we've lost contact with the Outer Rim colonies," came the reply from her communications officer, Lieutenant Veltar. His normally steady voice cracked as he continued, 17 worlds have gone dark in the past solar cycle. No distress signals, no evacuation alerts, nothing. Crixtel felt her stomach turn. The Zephyrian Empire had stood for over 2,000 years, their advanced technology and superior tactics allowing them to expand across countless star systems. They had faced rebellions, conquered primitive species, and maintained order through their powerful fleet. But this was different. The first reports had seemed impossible. Entire planetary defense networks, each capable of destroying small moons, had simply vanished. Military installations that could withstand supernova-level bombardments were found as nothing more than cooling slag. Most disturbing of all, there were survivors on some worlds, civilians who spoke of ships that moved like ghosts through space, weapons that tore through shields as if they were paper, and beings that fought with a savagery that defied all military doctrine. "Show me the reconnaissance data from Kepler-7, Crixtel ordered. The main holographic display shifted, showing the devastated remains of what had once been a thriving industrial world. The massive orbital shipyards that had produced the Empire's most advanced vessels were twisted metal sculptures drifting in space. The planet's surface showed crater patterns unlike anything in their military databases, precise, methodical, as if someone had systematically eliminated every strategic target with surgical precision. "The attack pattern is unusual," reported Science Officer Yimdar, his tentacles nervously coiling and uncoiling as he analyzed the data. "The attackers didn't use overwhelming force. They used just enough power to achieve their objectives, no more. This suggests either conservation of resources or..." He paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. They wanted to send a message. Before Crixtel could respond, the command center's emergency klaxons began wailing. Emergency lights bathed everything in a harsh red glow as her tactical officer's voice cut through the noise. "Admiral, multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace at the system's edge. They're not using any propulsion signatures we recognize." The main display switched to show the outer system. At first, there was nothing, just a normal scatter of asteroids and the distant glow of their star. Then, as if reality itself was being torn open, shapes began to appear. They didn't emerge from hyperspace in the usual brilliant flash of exotic particles. Instead, they seemed to fold themselves out of nothingness, their forms becoming solid, as if the universe was remembering they existed. "By the eternal stars," whispered someone behind her. The ships were unlike anything in the Imperial databases. They were angular, brutal things that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their hulls showed no elegant curves or artistic flourishes that marked advanced civilizations. These vessels were built for one purpose: war. Even from this distance, their weapons systems were clearly visible: massive gun batteries, missile pods, and energy projectors that dwarfed anything the Zephyrians had ever constructed. "How many?" Crixtel asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Preliminary count shows 47 capital ships, Admiral. Each one is approximately 3 times the mass of our largest dreadnought. They're accompanied by what appears to be several hundred smaller vessels." The Admiral's blood turned to ice. The Empire's entire home fleet consisted of 12 capital ships and their escorts. Even if they called in every vessel from every system, they would be outnumbered and outgunned by a massive margin. "Are they responding to our communication attempts?" "Negative, Admiral. They're maintaining complete radio silence." "But..." The communications officer paused, checking his readings again. "They're broadcasting something on an open frequency. It's not directed at us. It appears to be an internal communication. Put it through the translators." The command center fell silent except for the hum of processing equipment. Then, clear as if it came from someone standing beside them, a voice filled the air. It was deep, measured, and carried an accent unlike anything in their linguistic databases. This is Admiral Harrison of the United Earth Defense Force, commanding the Expeditionary Fleet. All units, you are weapons free. Primary objective remains unchanged. Elimination of all Zephyrian military assets. Collateral damage to civilian populations should be minimized, but mission parameters take priority. Remember, these creatures have been systematically exterminating peaceful species for centuries. Today, that ends. The transmission cut off, leaving the Zephyrian command center in stunned silence. Admiral Crixtel felt her heart's racing as the implications sank in. These weren't random raiders or pirates. This was an organized military force, and they had come specifically for the Zephyrians. Admiral, her tactical officer said quietly, they're moving. All contacts are adjusting course toward our position. Estimated time to weapons range, 47 standard minutes. Crixtel straightened her shoulders. She had not risen to command the home fleet by backing down from fights, no matter how hopeless they seemed. Signal all ships, battle stations. Deploy the fleet in defensive formation around the orbital platforms. If these humans want to fight, we'll give them one they'll remember. But even as she gave the orders, doubt gnawed at her mind. In all their centuries of conquest, the Zephyrians had never faced an enemy that struck with such precision, such purpose. The way these human ships moved through space, the casual efficiency with which they had dismantled the outer colonies, it spoke of experience, of a military machine that had been honed through countless conflicts. As her fleet formed up around the home system's defensive installations, Admiral Crixtel couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to face something far beyond their experience. The humans had traveled impossible distances to reach them, had somehow learned of their military installations and weaknesses, and now approached with the confidence of a force that had never known defeat. The final transmission from the human admiral echoed in her mind. Today, that ends. She was beginning to understand that he wasn't just talking about Zephyrian expansion. He was talking about the Zephyrian Empire itself. In the darkness between the stars, the human fleet continued its steady advance, their angular ships cutting through space like knives through silk. Behind them, they left a trail of liberated worlds and freed species. Ahead of them lay the heart of an empire that had ruled through fear and oppression for 2 millennia. The Zephyrians were about to learn why humanity had earned their place among the stars not through conquest, but through the simple principle that some lines should never be crossed. And the systematic extermination of peaceful species was one of them.